Welcome to another episode of our Founders Podcast. I'm your host, Ash, and this is a show where I interview proven founders and industry experts who share their stories, strategies, and insights to help you build, launch, and grow your business. In this episode, we talk to Angelo Ponzi. He is one of our esteemed guests, which I've been, waiting to host on our show. He works with fractional CMOs and CSOs for different services. So I hope you enjoy the show. Angelo, welcome to the show.
Ash, thank you so much. Really appreciate being here.
Great, Angelo. Do you have a favorite quote, something that inspires or motivates you, you would like to share with our audience?
Sure. It's a quote by John F. Kennedy, and it's change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past or the present are certainly to miss the future.
Interesting, interesting. Cool. So, Angelo, I'm eager to learn more about the person. Can you take us back to your roots and share with our listeners about your upbringing, your childhood? Just before we started the recording, you were talking about your schooling. How did your early experiences shape your journey and eventually led you to become the visionary person today, entrepreneur today?
Well, yeah, so that's an interesting story, and actually, I've been working on a book about it,
Hmm.
and it's based on mostly my father. My mother had a big influence too, but mostly my father,
Hmm.
um, who was a plumber. And the book is called Lessons Learned from the Number One Plumber in the Number Two Industry. And it talks about kind of the things that he either really meant to teach me or the perception of teaching. So I grew up in a small town in upstate New York, and Italian family. And so there was no such thing as a free lunch. And so at an early age, we had paper routes, we cut grass, we shoveled snow, anything to make a buck. Um, and that early on, and then as we went on, and I got into kind of the eighth grade in high school, he had me working in his plumbing business with him. So I spent a good number of years in my high school years doing plumbing, which was a great trade. What I learned is I didn't want to be a plumber. But
Hmm.
growing up in that small area, I got to work building parks on the side of freeways. Worked at a historical fort as a janitor or maintenance guy, and so worked got access to all this incredible stuff. I worked in a paper factory, so I had a lot of jobs that number one allowed me to realize what I did not want to do, but it also exposed me to life instead of a bubble of being the plumber's son, right? I got to see all these other things,
Hmm.
and so coming to that conclusion when I decided to go to school, um, it was really I loved and I do love television and movies, and so I thought that
Hmm.
would be a really cool industry to be involved in.
Hmm.
But I'm not an actor. I used to be, not anymore. I was very shy and introvert, and so it was like, no way you're going to put me in front of the camera. So what could I do? And I could get into production, but that's a little more labor oriented than I wanted. And
Hmm.
so I started thinking about how to people promote movies, and that kind of led me down the path to marketing.
Hmm.
And that's how I ended up in the kind of the business side, marketing and strategy, and also had some association with the movie industry as well. I still like that aspect, and that was when I came to California. That was kind of the reason I came here, and I can talk about that.
Hmm.
So as we were talking before the show, I had an opportunity to go to school in London.
Hmm.
And again, small kid from a small town, introvert, shy, and now here I'm in for the first time ever. I left the United States and was put with a bunch of people that I had only knew one person, and so that
Hmm.
was a big effort for me. But that started to kind of help shape me and make me a little more extroverted. Came back, I finished up at one of the state universities in New York,
Hmm.
and then I'm giving you a long history really short. My sister had a friend whose husband was the director of marketing of Disneyland. And
Okay.
so when I came out my senior year in college, he said to me, when you graduate, come out, I'll take care of you. Now,
Hmm.
I'm an Italian from New York. That means something different to me than apparently it meant to the people out here in California. So I came out, I turned down a job in New York, and turned out to be the only thing he fixed me up with was some names. He didn't even make phone calls. He just wrote them on a piece of paper and handed them to me. So I spent a
Mhm.
lot of time chasing opportunities to get a job. My first job actually out of college was I worked at the Gap.
Oh,
Um,
the apparel
the
store.
apparel, yeah. So
Yeah.
folding clothes, and I realized very quickly that folding clothes was not my thing. So I rapidly got myself on as a cashier.
Uh-huh.
Um, And then my sister had another friend whose husband owned an advertising agency. And
Mhm.
so that's got me my first step into the advertising business where, I was learning the business itself.
Mhm.
But so over the next many years, I was either working for an advertising agency
Mhm.
or I went client side because I always felt that I needed to understand why the clients were why clients were difficult. And
Mhm.
so having that opportunity to go back and forth, I actually had my first entrepreneurial experience at the age of 23.
Mhm.
Um, at my second agency, the very first day I was on set, I was on a television set. We were making a television commercial, and I was like, "Oh man, I've got that one part of my dream that I never really achieved." And so the next 2.5 years working for this agency, we did a lot of commercials, and I met the production people, and then I'll say around 23ish, they convinced me that we could start our own production company,
Mhm.
and which we did. I thought my money, which was the money that my parents had saved for me for a rainy day, and their knowledge. And that was my first understanding that not everybody is as maybe truthful as you want them to be,
Yeah.
in their knowledge and capabilities. So we took off, did really well, and then within 8 months, it was over. So
Mm.
hard lesson learned. I didn't know what I wanted to do at that point in time. I had a little touch of creativity. A friend of mine and I were writing television scripts, but it wasn't paying the bills. And I lived very frugally, if you will. Um, my only activity in life was jogging, and
Mhm.
I thought I wanted to be a creative director. A friend of mine took me in and says, "I'll teach you." And a week later, he told me I was horrible and I should go
Mhm.
back to marketing.
Mhm.
So I ended up at a job with an international advertising agency called Bozell. But throughout all of that kind of early stages, I always ended up being the account guy, the planner, and then as my skill set evolved, the strategist. So even
Mm.
from the very beginning, I found the things that um, I really wanted to do.
Mhm.
And so, again, client side, agency side. And then there was a point in time where I left the agency world and I became a strategic planner to other agencies, places that I competed against. And I did that for about 5 years. And then one day I said, why am I doing this for them? I should do
Mm.
it for myself. So I started my own agency, which I was fortunate to grow and sell. I was acquired at one point in time. And
Mhm.
the agency that bought us also acquired my creative partners. So I was more marketing, everything marketing, no creative. And so I had creative partners. So they bought us
Mhm.
both, put us together. We had another advertising agency that lasted about 8 years, very consumer oriented. Um, and it was great. And then, long story short, the parent company decides they're going to absorb us and move us. And I had young kids and I didn't want to move. And so that was the end of that. Took another client side job. And then in 2000, so I was there 2011 to 2014, early 14, we were acquired. The new CEO was standing, giving a presentation about the future. I raised
Mhm.
my hand at the end and said, my division's not in your plan. And I watched him panic along with the rest of my people. And
Mhm.
I came home that night and said, I'm done. I'm going to go work for myself again. And so I
Yeah.
started this, and it's been a little over 10 years.
Wow, wow. And I want to go into this part because
Sure.
this is interesting later on. But couple of things. Um, you mentioned that you started working with the director of marketing, which your sister suggested you to work with. Well, not working with, you went to him for help, and then instead of
Yep.
helping you, he just gave you a couple bunch of names. Then you started working with Gap, folding clothes. And then you thought, not my thing. Let's move on. And then started working with an ad agency. Is that correct? How old are you that time?
I'm
20-ish, 21,
20. Yeah, 20.
20?
My
Yeah.
birthday's late in the year. So, I
Okay.
went to college at 17.
Okay.
So I graduated at 20.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, so I'm young, right? It's my
Very, very young.
experience is business wise at that point in time is really limited to my entrepreneurial stuff as a kid, right? And all I was doing is raising money so I could go buy candy and stuff, but
Yeah.
and working for my dad. So those were my first experiences, and I went at them, I guess, because of my upbringing, just to trust, right? Have
Mm.
confidence in people, and again, those early days, the director of marketing at Disneyland at the time, basically said, "Yes, I'll help you. Here are some names. Give them a call." And
Mm.
he didn't even call them for me. It was like, "Here, go." And then the guy, my first advertising agency, um, he convinced me with some carrots, if you will. And then when those carrots turned out to be, onions,
Mm.
um,
Mm.
I said, "Hey, I need some more money." And it was like, "Yeah, you do, but I don't actually do that. You got to go talk to this other lady who's in charge of, payrolls." And she told me if she thought I was worth what I thought I was worth, I should find another job, which I did.
Mm. Mm.
So I learned right out of the chute, first two jobs, it was, or first two experiences dealing with the business world, were people that, in my opinion, um, didn't follow through with the promises that they made. So again, learned early on. Now my second job, that was completely different. That agency was fantastic. They embraced me. They trained me. They gave me those opportunities. Like they knew I liked the movie stuff. So even though I was just a, account guy and a strategist, they would take me to the TV shoots.
Mm.
And, when possible, I'd actually, be a grip or, some gopher on the set just because to get that experience. And so
Nice, nice.
completely different experience. And after that, they were all different experiences than those first two out of the chute.
Yeah, yeah. Great stuff. Cool. And you emphasize on data-driven marketing, if I'm
Mhm.
not wrong, right? Can you walk us through your process of gathering and leveraging marketing insights? Because that's what I have been, I've been studying your profile, and that popped out everywhere, like your posts, the things you talk about. And this is like the common theme across all of your content online. And I'm like, okay, this is interesting because the whole world is moving towards data. You agree or not, because you cannot deny what the fact is, isn't it? And then somebody who is preaching that and following it at the core, but in marketing space, that's brilliant for me. I mean, I know you can put like analytics on your portal, understand where the customers are going, etc., etc., but then this is something which comes after the customer, potential customer, or prospects come to you. But marketing is something which is open, and then you need to do quite a lot of analysis beforehand, and then go to the open market, isn't it? Yeah, please do talk about it
I,
a little.
I, I find I found over the years, and whether it's this company or other companies, that the kind of the due diligence that an organization really needs to do in many cases becomes secondary.
Mm.
Now, and I use that in a broad term because it really kind of depends whether you're a consumer business, your B2B business, how
Hmm.
big you are, right? If you're a small to medium sized company, you're not investing dollars in research and competitive analysis and doing all that stuff. And so I found, especially when I started this company, people would say, hey, I just need a website. I need a whatever PPC campaign. And my back to them was, well, let me look at the research that you have, any data. Let me dig into your financials and all this kind of stuff. And they go, I just need a campaign. And my point to them, and it still is to this day, 10 years later, is how do I create or create the strategy and messaging, if you will, for a campaign if I don't know who I'm talking to?
Exactly.
I don't know your motivations. Yes, you can sit here and tell me all day long what you think, but frankly, I don't really care. And that's always hard. That always raises the eyebrows on a client, because at the end of the day, it's their customers. I need to know what they think, not what you think. And yes, maybe your salespeople tell you, but I'm guaranteed there's coming with some bias. And so my whole thing is I have to, in developing the work that I do, I have to understand the market. I have to understand your customers and your prospects. I have to understand where you're positioned. I have to understand internally, are your stakeholders in alignment? Because I believe that if your team is not in alignment, no matter what I do, they're not going to be in alignment at the end, right? So a lot of this process is internal as well, right? Digging in, understanding, what different people think, where they rate. So I have an assessment tool that I use, and I usually use this story. So I did this. This was a 75-year-old company. The current leadership's been running it for 26 years. And so in one of the pieces of the assessment, it talks about onboarding. And so we're going through the results, because I can look at it from an aggregate, but I can also look at the individuals, because I think that's important depending on who they are. So the CEO says to me, or says to the guy in the room, which is the number 2 guy in charge, says, you rated our onboarding program a 1. And he turned and says, you rated it a 5. And the CEO turned back and says, but you're the guy in charge. You're giving it a 1. And I said, wait a minute. I said, the really important thing is you guys have been working together for 26 years and you're having this discussion today. And yes, that is just something that wasn't discussed, that wasn't uncovered. Same thing about, in this particular case, their customers. They go, oh, they love us. We've been doing this a long time, blah, blah, blah. Why do you need to talk to them? And so I kept pushing the fact, and they finally said, fine, talk to our customers. And they were right. Customers loved them. However, this is just one of the nuggets, but to me, this was the most important. Their current clients, the people they deal with to get their orders and kind of get spec'd into jobs, this was a B2B company, were only within 5 years of retirement. The new generation, the 30-year-olds and the early 40s, didn't really recommend them. They didn't understand them. They didn't really know them. The client would tell me, oh, the young guys just go to the old guys. Well, the old guys weren't going to be there anymore. And so they were not marketing to this new generation who was already turning to customers or our competitors that were using environmentally friendly products and could do more package pricing than my client was doing. And so the big nugget that came out of this research was, if you don't do something to change this, you won't be in business in 5 years. And so kind of the strategies then were to, how do we start to get these people to understand who we are, educate them, what can we do to bring them onto our side? But that all came out because we talked to their customers. And so that's why it's important, whether, I don't care how big of a business you are, that to get out of your own head, get out of your own boardroom, quit listening to your own people, and go out to your customers and find out. A lot of times, one of the questions I like to know is from the stakeholders, how do you perceive our clients think about us? How would they describe us? Then I ask the client, how would you describe them? And 9 out of 10 times, there are big disparity in what the thinking is. So now, what's the right way to go, right? How do you bring that alignment? Where are the gaps? Where are those opportunities? Where are the barriers and challenges? So if your audience is following me, how do I go market a company when they're not in alignment? The customers in the marketplace, the prospects see them very differently than the client thinks themselves are. And how do you tell that story? And so that's where, that foundational research comes in, whether it's qualitative, quantitative, predictive modeling, whatever it happens to be. But to gather those insights. And the other thing that a lot of companies don't do, they don't spend time digging into their own data. So two quick case studies. Client I work with, I currently sit on their board. We spent the first 3 months digging into their historical data. It was a 30-year-old company. One of the things they found was that they have traditionally won 30% of every proposal they put out. Brilliant. Now, what percentage do you want to win? 30% of $1,000 pitch or 30% of $1 million pitch, right? And what we also found is that their average salesperson had 750 accounts. Maybe 100 of them were actually generating revenue. The rest were just, small commission structures. Yet that was pulling their attention away from going after the big stuff. So by just digging into that data, we were able to really understand how to structure a sales program, how to structure a new, the expansions outside of California, those kinds of things. And then another one last year, med tech company. They had, when I first started working with them, they had a goal of 30% increase in revenue. Okay, what do I know? Okay, fine. Had a pipeline that was very aged. I think the youngest prospect on the pipeline was 150 days. But when I dug into their data, their growth was only 6 to 6.5% a year for the last 5 years. So how do you go from 6% to 37%? What are you going to do differently? And that's a question I get asked, right? I'm a 10-year-old company. We're $5 million, we're 20 million, whatever it happens to be. And we want to be 50 million in 3 years. Well, wait a minute. In 20 years, you only got to 10. And now in 3 more years, you want to get to 50. Okay, I call it deconstructing. Let's take that 50 million. Let's deconstruct it. Let's figure out where the revenue is coming from. Is it renewable? Is it one-time deals? Is there a frequency? The company I was talking about with the 30%, for example, if they sell a big project today, that big project won't come around again for 3 to 5 years. So we have to adjust that kind of revenue stream. So what do? We sell them some ancillary products each year, blah, 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 but it's never as big as the big project. So how do you account for that? So we set up if we want to get to a certain revenue goal, what's renewable? What can you count on? Are there any percentage of clients you can go back and win back? So you add that up, A plus B, equals the difference that you need to make to hit the revenue goal. It's such a simple formula. But that company continues to use that. And I was working with them in 2016. And like I said, I sit on their board now. But that basic formula is still being used. Why? Because they have a business that has a lot of renewals in it versus I'm going to sell you a big machine today. And I'm not going to, I'll say, supplies and stuff, but you're not going to buy another big machine unless you need it, right? So understanding where that revenue is coming from, what the longevity is, how long does it take, what's the sales structure, using reps, using internal people, all those things really help impact of how you're going to reach your goal. And really dissecting those and again, thinking them through before you start running out and start doing marketing. I had a client that came in and said, we tried PPC, didn't work, tried it for a year. Okay. But we tried it again in January, didn't work again. I go, well, what'd you do different? Nothing. Did you use somebody different? No, same people. Well, I could have told you. My favorite is, yeah, SEO's not working, let's cancel it. You've been doing it for 30 days. I could have told you it wasn't going to work in 30 days. I did tell you it wasn't going to work in 30 days. So there's that expectations on the other side of, again, your listeners, small or big, is understanding building a brand takes time. Doesn't happen overnight. I've been working with a company in the payments industry. And, in the first 6 months, we're laying a lot of that foundation, trying to understand, reworking their websites, all their messaging, blah, blah, blah. And here we are almost a little over 2 years later, and he's one of the leading thought leaders in his vertical segment. But it was crafted that way. We structured it that way. Anything that's written is from him. Getting him on speaking engagements, sitting on panels, working with the largest trade shows and conferences. So, but it's 2 years later, and now he's benefiting from that. But it took time. There were many times there'd be like, I'm not sure, maybe we need to pull the plug. And it's like, no, just stay the course, right? Don't listen to other people. And so that's, again, advice to your audience is it's not, you can't fix it today. You can't fix it tomorrow. It takes time. And that's where the planning comes in. I mean, I do my own marketing. If I'm going to tell my clients this is good for them, it's good for me. So we post, we blog, we do all that stuff. I do speaking engagements. We're in the process of finishing a book. All these different, got videos and courses. Why? Because I don't know how somebody's going to come in to my world. And so, I've got a lot of fishing poles, if you will, in the lake, trying to catch somebody.
So most of our listeners, they are founders or people who want to get out of 9 to 5 rat race, right? The questions they always come across, especially towards somebody like you as a guest on the show, who specialize in being a fractional CMO, CSO. What kind of advice would you give our listeners when it comes to early age startups? Not for raising money, because that's a different space, I think so, but gaining more traction on their products or services.
Well, I think that, so I'm working with a startup right now, and part of my thing is we're chasing product. We're talking a lot about the product. And my pitch to them is we need to talk about the value, the benefits, the applications, the problems that we solve, not about the widget, right? There's a saying, don't tell me how you built the watch, just tell me what time it is.
Yeah.
And the biggest problem, I think, with entrepreneurs and people who create products and services, I've fallen into this category myself before. We tend to fall in love with what we did and don't really talk about the benefits of what we've created and how it helps people. One of the sayings, and I encourage all your listeners to ask themselves this question: what business are you in? What business am I in? I mean, I'm not really in the business of marketing. I'm not in the business of being a chief strategy officer. I'm in the business of helping my clients become successful. I happen to use those tools to help them get there. But I don't consider myself just a marketing guy. I'm very holistic. I get involved in, I want to know your manufacturing. I want to know your processes. I want to learn all this stuff. And so I think that's where we're especially founders and entrepreneurs in the early stages, we tend to just fall in love with what we've built. And in the case in point, and I won't say who this is, but it's an incredible product. As a matter of fact, I joined the organization as a fractional because I saw the demo and was like, holy moly, this is unbelievable. I can see the future. But now I've been at this about 3-4 months now, and the founder wants to talk about the product. As a matter of fact, we were promoting a section of one of the applications within the product. And my point to them over the weekend was, and nobody knows who we are. Why would I use a product I've never even heard of? I've never heard of the company, right? And so thinking that out strategically. So how do you build that? Are you a local company? Is your local, or your regional, or your national, or your international? And if your goal is to be an international organization, you just can't come out one day and say I'm international. It's too big, especially as a startup. So where can you niche? Where can you find a vertical that you can go dominate, if you will? Whether you're a local retail store, or whether you're building software, or whether you creating apparel, whatever it happens to be. But how do you grow that so you can get some traction, awareness, get people to start thinking about you, certainly some revenue, that can help perpetuate that growth, as opposed to trying to be all things to all people. If you do that. So we'd always talk about in the early days, if we want to do product testing, we'd find areas like San Diego here in California. It's its own ecosystem, has its own television stations, its own radio, its own enclosed environment, versus Los Angeles, the DMA of Los Angeles, and it's like, I don't know, how many, 9, 10, 15, 20 million people. It comprises of 3 different counties or maybe 4 different counties. And so if you wanted to target somebody in the county I live in, and you use Los Angeles television, you're marketing to millions and millions of people that may never come to my retail store, so to speak, right? So it's really understanding your target, understanding their motivations, again, whether it's a consumer product, whether it's a B2B product. And the one thing I always say is, no matter what you do, your website has to be able to communicate and tell the story and the value that I'm going to benefit from. So customer-centric approach versus company. Company for me, is about a reason to believe, not necessarily the reason to buy. Now, if I was Apple or somebody else, they would start to a different story, because the brand carries such a cachet. But if I don't know who you are, I mean, even as I build me. And the other thing that's also in the early stages is your brand, your company tends to take on your characteristics, your personality. So I recognize that. I mean, my brand has a lot of my personality in it, because I'm the founder. Now, when I had my advertising agency before I sold it, it wasn't necessarily all me anymore, right? Because it evolved over the years. There were more people involved in senior leadership, and it took a little different shape. But I think that's probably the biggest thing I say to companies: ask yourself, what business are you in, and making sure that you understand what your customers and markets are looking for. Again, I don't care how big or small you are. I worked with I do some mentoring at one of the universities here, and I was called in to mentor this company, these kids that started a subscription-based shoe company. It's interesting.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah.
Wow.
So their plan was they would buy shoes or get shoes from different companies. They would rent them forever, how long. And when the shoes were done, they would be returned, given to charity. And that was their model. So the first thing I asked him is, did you do any research? Yes. Okay, great. Can I see it? Well, we asked my mom and my dad and my sister, my cousin, my brother, and my friends. They all said it was a great idea. I said, but did you actually ask anybody or do any work with the people that are going to rent your shoes? No. So that was my first flag, right?
Yeah.
Because their friends and family told them it was a great idea. Therefore, it was a great idea. Then they had a limited budget. And so we talked about how we could roll this out and be more strategic in that. But they got this bug that they wanted to work with a big fashion PR firm out of New York, which I counseled them against. They didn't listen. They did it, and all their money was gone within 6 months. And then they were gone a few months later. So instead of figuring out a way to kind of build some momentum, groundswell, if you will, right? To get to the point, you've got the thing working. Now you've got something to talk about. You have customers that can say, this was the greatest thing since sliced bread, right? I needed shoes for a prom. I got the shoes and it was fantastic. And now that I know they're going to charity, and that's a story.
Yeah.
And it is about the story. What's your story, right? It's not about, I got this great widget that's going to solve all the problems of the world.
Yeah.
What's the story you can tell, right? Because we all relate to stories.
We all do.
Yeah, it's about the story.
Yeah. Yeah. And what trends do you advise? What trends do you predict will dominate the marketing world over the next, let's say, 5 years, in your opinion?
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't say AI. Um, it's interesting. A year ago, just about a year ago, I was introduced to Chat GPT,
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of us. And I was at a meeting, and a digital marketing agency owner stood up and said, I've fired all my copywriters. I'm only
Mm-hmm.
going to use Chat GPT. Now, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
us, there were 4 or 5 marketing people in the room. We all went, what? That sounds pretty, not even silly, stupid.
Yeah.
Um, but a year later, through experimentation and, I look at these tools and they say, how can I use these tools for ideation, to
Mm.
analyze some research? Are they capable? Do I just go, hey, write me something? No.
Yeah.
And I think that's where some people make mistakes. However, they are every day, they're getting better and better. Then you add in, which is actually one of the new clients I have, agentic AI. So now we've got bots, avatars, if you will, um, centralized and decentralized, beginning to talk to each other. So
Yeah.
now going in, right, I've got a customer service question, but that customer service bot needs to know what happened to my order. Instead of me getting routed over to the order desk, the bots are talking to each other. So I think in marketing, this is going to really drastically change, especially from automation. I saw an email I received this morning about using AI for um, attribution models. And I personally think that's a big one, especially in our world of marketing,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
most attribution models are not that good. Now, I don't know if these are going to be any good yet, and they're very expensive, so I probably won't be testing them out. But I think as we start to see that more and more, that the bots can go, we're working with a company that's got 65,000 products on their e-commerce site, but they want to adjust pricing. Well, that would take an army of people to do it. And by the time they finished, it would be time to do it over again. Well, the bots
Yeah.
could potentially go out and do it in a matter of minutes or hours, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's going to change business, it's going to change marketing, it's going to change a lot of the things that we're doing. Now, I'm not sure I'm going to have a robot walking around my house anytime too soon.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe Elon thinks I'm going to at 20 grand a pop. But I think in the marketing world, we're going to see more and more of that. When with the internet and digital transformation, things happen quicker, right? We are impatient individuals. If I send you a text, I expect an immediate response. Doesn't matter what you're doing. Nobody thinks about that, right? But we're an immediate and instantaneous world. I expect this gratification very quickly, right? You want things to happen, and I think that with the advent of AI and things like that, we're going to be seeing more and more of that. Um, and again, I'm being pitched out of. I'm not sure where these guys are. Uh, to create avatars of me, they can go out and do business pitches for me.
Mm.
You know, uh, it's clunky, it's not there, but 6 months ago, a year ago, that didn't even exist. So as
Definitely.
we're going to see it, and the only thing I keep thinking of, and I don't know if you're a Terminator fan, but I keep thinking of Skynet, from those movies. So it's a little scary too.
Yeah. No, 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 absolutely right. Absolutely right. Great. So I think, Angelo, so I do this with all of my guests. So we kind of go through the journey of our guests. So this is what I've drafted for you. So you started like a normal life, but you had this privilege, I must say, that you get to do some real work in real life, which is not everyone get to do. To be honest, mostly our lives are a bit boring in that sense. But you had this privilege. Then you happen to uh, get into real life quite quickly once you graduated with help of family or friends, where you learn about what you like, what you don't like, as well as what you're good at it, because that's the dilemma which new fresh blood usually stuck for quite a long time, right? Like some people start working with the companies and they just get into that comfort zone for so deep because of the debts and everything that they can't get out of it. But you were leveraged enough that you were able to make quick decisions in your life. And then once you found out that you're good with marketing, people started calling you the account guy, the planner, the strategist. Kind of you like the sound that enable you to focus on more on the marketing side of things. You mentioned a couple of things about data-driven marketing, that you have to focus on the market, prospects, stakeholder alignment, as well as your customers. And I love the fact that you're preaching exactly what you're doing in your own business. That when you have a product, you have a service, you're a startup, you should not talk about the product. Instead, you talk about the benefits, because that's what your customer is after, right? Anything else do you think which we are missing or I missed to note down in this chart today?
No, that's actually pretty good. I've never seen anybody do this. So my hat's off to you on this one. Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at prospects, the market, again, we could get very deep in this, but it's also about distribution. How do people
Mm-hmm.
consume the product? How is it distributed? How is it sold? I think those are important. Talking to a company right now, and they sell through a rep organizations. I have another one that has direct salespeople. Another one that has 5 people inside doing, I call it smile and dial trying. So it's back to what is that structure? If
Mm-hmm.
they're on the B2C side, and you're, like I say, if you're a brick and mortar store, you know what's your trading area? How many people live in your community? How many people leave your community? I worked in the restaurant industry a lot for fast food,
Yeah.
QSRs. And we always used to take the location and then look at a 135 10-mile radius. What was our target audience within that radius? How many left the community every day to go to work, which means I wouldn't have them for lunch, versus how many came into the community. And so I could look at my day parts. I broke it down into day parts. How many people could I get for breakfast? Did it make sense to be open for breakfast? I worked with
Mm-hmm.
ice cream parlors. Well, we're not open for breakfast. So looking at, is it a lunch product? Is it a snack product? Is it a after school product? And you got to understand that kind of ebb and flow, because ultimately you have to determine, are your customers there? How far will people drive? How people are going to drive, get in the car and drive to go to your restaurant or go to buy your shoes or whatever it happens to be, right? So, that consumer side, right? And everybody's, you know, frankly, goes to the internet. We all go to Amazon to buy our products. I personally don't like going to malls anymore. I don't have to. I can do everything I need to do. So that's a change in the way people shop, and you need to adjust that way. So again, that's just all part of it. And then the others, probably process and of course people, because without people, no matter what you have or do, won't happen. So the people part of it's important, making sure that, doing Jim Collins, having the right people on the bus, and not
Mm-hmm.
only on the bus, but make sure they're in the right seats.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of people want to bring on their friends and family especially in the early stages, but, they may not necessarily be the right people either. So
Yeah.
those are hard decisions as a founder that you have to make, how to grow. I hired friends earlier on in my agency days when I started my own agency, but I also had
Mm-hmm.
to let them go, and that was tough because we were all family friends.
Yeah.
And so I learned some lessons there. My father taught me that lesson earlier on: don't hire family, and don't
Mm.
do work for family.
Yeah. 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 They're your family, right? Cool. Cool. Well, I don't know. I think That's what we wanted to. I'm enjoying this conversation that I want to go forward, but then like we are limited with the time, right? So we have a quick fire round. We've got like six quick fire question for you, and then you can answer them as quickly as possible. So are you ready for that?
All right.
Great stuff. Cool. So what's the top three strategies to market your startup in 2024, 2025?
Well, I'm going to go back to understanding your customer, knowing how they shop, where they shop, how they buy, I think is probably the most important thing, because ultimately that drives everything else. If I know you, I know your behaviors, I know what you're looking for, then I can figure out how to get to you. If I don't know
Got it.
that, I don't know how to get to you. So that would probably be my first.
Got it. What book would you suggest or recommend to our audience and why?
Um, I still go back to two books. Good to Great by Jim Collins has been one of my favorites. I think it's really helpful. There's some great strategies in there to help open the eyes of people. But the other one is actually, and it's been a long time favorite of mine, is the Sun Tzu. Um, and if you and there's been interpretation, Sun Tzu, the business side of Sun Tzu, right? Somebody interpreted all his teachings into business strategies. So between those two books, I find that they're incredible. I used to work for a company that brought me in as a fractional, and I made everybody read that book because there's a lot of great lessons in it. So I'm a big fan of it.
Got it. What one attribute or characteristic in your mind of a successful founder?
Say that again.
What one attribute or characteristic in your mind of a successful founder?
Um, Risk taker,
Mhm.
because you have to be to start a business.
Yeah, yeah. Couldn't agree more on this one because quite a lot of us just can't take that leap of faith, and then until you take it, you can't do it, right? So yeah, good one. What's your favorite personal productivity tool or habit?
Productivity tool. You know that so the tool, as I use Remarkable,
Hmm.
that digital notebook, I use
Yeah.
that. And I do deviate, like I got papers all over the place, but I like that tool because I can basically carry all my client notes with me everywhere I go, so I don't have to drag my computer. But the other thing I've been doing lately is I'm using the to-do list in my Microsoft Outlook. And
Okay.
building lists, and it's hard because I have this tendency just to want to use sticky notes. And
Mm.
if I do use sticky notes, but I print it out and then I'll write new stuff on it and then I'll go enter it in. And that I found is probably one of the best things that keep me organized. And so I can do my daily list of things I need to accomplish, but in the meantime, I can keep a record of all the stuff that needs to get done. And then I also put the app on my phone. So not Outlook, but just the to-do list. And so they sync. And so I have all my to-dos. Like I say, if I'm leaving the office, I have all my files. I can upload stuff. So those are my two productivity tools.
Yep. Yep. Okay. What's a new or a crazy business idea you would love to pursue if you had time?
This idea. Um, yeah, I don't think I have any crazy business ideas at this point in time. The thing I like to pursue, I'd like to have more time to play music, but other than that, yeah, I don't really have any crazy stuff. I mean, stuff I'm doing, right? I'm writing a book. I've got a mini course on my website that's for free. I want to do a bigger one. So I would say it's more business stuff. I don't have any side hustles. I don't want to make apparel. I don't want to. I did that once before. Didn't work.
Okay. No problem.
Help my kids launch a apparel company.
Okay. And what's interesting or a fun fact about you that most people don't know?
So I do play music. I'm a
Hmm.
musician, and I've played in several bands throughout the years. But what people wouldn't know is that I had an opportunity to be the house band for, and your audience may not know them, but Eddie Money, a guy named Mike Reno, who was the lead singer of Loverboy, Alec Lickerwood, who was the original singer in Santana, and a guy named Jamie Jameson, who sang the Survivor song for the Rocky movies. And so it was a charity event. My band was the house bands. We had to learn all their music and play. So I got to play with those, guys for a weekend, and
Awesome.
it was awesome.
Awesome. That's great. Great. Well, Angelo, thanks so much for joining me and sharing your story, unpacking years of your building your business, your life, and some of the ups and downs. People want to get in touch with you. People want to check out your course. What's the best way to do it?
So LinkedIn is the best way to connect with me or to find out about me. You can link from LinkedIn to my website. On my website, I have a mini marketing course that's free. I have some free ebooks, competitive analysis, one on storytelling, a lot of videos, um, links to my old podcast. So a lot of resources there on the site if they want to go hit that as well. And that, if you put that in the show notes, but it's craftmarketingandbranding.com. But again, you can get there from LinkedIn, which is the best place to connect with me.
Great. Angelo, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your inspiring journey, your impactful work you're doing. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on Founders Podcast.
Thank you, Ash.
Thank you all for tuning into this episode of Founders Podcast. I hope you found our conversation with Angelo insightful and inspiring. If you want to get in touch, just search on LinkedIn Angelo Ponzi, get in touch with him on LinkedIn, or click on the link for his website and go and check out the free course. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to our podcast and stay updated on our future interviews with proven founders and industry experts. Stay inspired, stay motivated, and keep building.